I was fitting some windows around this man's house. And it was interesting because in the 80s, there was a band called Yaz and the Plastic Population. And she sung a song called The Only Way Is Up. And it was a catchy tune. And I saw a gold record, on the wall, and I asked about it. And Mr. Cohen started explaining his connection to the song and how it involved his parents. And as you can guess, the name Cohen, he is of Jewish descent, but he was rather a bohemian chap and quite pleasant. And later in the day, as I was fitting his windows, his wife turned up. And his wife was from India, from Mumbai. I've been there, and that's a crazy place. And she's talking about the bohemian lifestyle she was one of those people that everything is wonderful. And then she started talking about enlightenment. And I tried to explain that you can't be enlightened. No one can. You already are. Now, what you call you is just a story you tell yourself. It's just a collection of events that have transpired with the progression of time in your life. But that's not who you are. You are an individuation of consciousness, and consciousness is the enlightened state. Now, when you become aware that you are little more than a fiction that you've created for yourself, and you recognize that and you realize it, then you will also realize that protecting it is farcical, because you either like the story or you don't. It's funny. Identity politics, even at an individual level, identifying with a story that the people have made for themselves. So to become enlightened is to understand that you are not the story you tell yourself. It's just a story. That's all it is. And then you recognize that everybody is telling themselves this story. Jesus said, you are gods. So everyone is a god. And they've forgotten. They've forgotten their first love, which is consciousness, to be able to observe without judgment. That is what consciousness is. It's just to experience life in its rawness without the mind getting in the way, because the mind is the story. And people that haven't overcome the mind by recognizing it as simply a story, it doesn't matter if it's a good story or a bad story, even that in itself is a judgment. It doesn't exist. It's just a lie you tell yourself. So everyone is God pretending to be a story. And if they don't recognize that, they fooled themselves. Remember? Satan fooled the world. Satan meaning the opponent of higher consciousness, which is the enlightenment, recognizing that you are not the story you are telling yourself. You are far more. And as I was trying to explain this to this lady, you could see in her eyes that she was quite upset. because she was then protecting this belief system, this ideologue, this internal narrative that she's picked up along the way. It's just another story. It's difficult to tell people they don't exist. Because they say, yeah, I do, I'm stood before you. And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking the story, the narrative that you run inside your head. Somewhere in the scriptures it says that those that come to me hate their lives. In other words, in fact, another thing Jesus said is that it is harder for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven than it is for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle. And what he was saying is that a rich man is somebody that has everything that they need. And we're not just talking about money, it's just somebody who is going through life and it's fine. There's nothing that needs to be changed. And the woman is an example of a rich person, a rich man being a rich ego intellect. So the opposite of that is that a poor person would find it easy to get into heaven, rather like somebody who hates their life. So they become inverted, they go within. And that's the entire point of meditation, is to go within. So if you're dissatisfied with your life and you hate the narrative, the story you tell yourself, and you're questioning things, then you, the individual, needs to go within. You all know the story of the Good Samaritan. Now, I'm not getting into details of it. I'm just going to skim over the surface because that's where the gold is. Now, the Jews did not have a good relationship with the Samaritans. They hated each other. Well, the Jews hated the Samaritans. And there was one Jew, he had to make a journey and he had to pass outside of the Jewish territory. And he was beset upon by robbers and they robbed him. And not only did they rob him, they give him a good royal kicking as well. Kick the shit out of him. So he's lying there on this dirty dust track in the middle of fucking nowhere. He's had the shit kicked out of him. He's got no wealth anymore. He's been robbed. So at that point, his life is a pretty low ebb and he's feeling pretty shitty. And then the Good Samaritan comes along and looks after him. Read the story for yourselves. So what's that story about? Well, it's easy, Danny. It's about a Jew that went for a walk and got the shit kicked out of him by robbers, and then a Good Samaritan looked after him. Yes, that is what it's about. But what's the meaning to you, the individual? I'll explain. Those people that are dissatisfied or hate their lives, they are the ones that are on the road in the middle of fucking nowhere, in the wilderness. And life has kicked the shit out of you. And you're beat up and battered. And you've got nothing. Your pockets are empty. And you're just fucking lying there with dust in your throat. Sucking air. In the darkness. In the wilderness. And then the Good Samaritan appears and lifts you up and tends to you and educates you and puts you back on the path again under your own steam. The Good Samaritan, of course, is indicative of your own higher consciousness. The dusty path in the wilderness is walking through life, not understanding what's going on. The robbers and the thieves giving you a good kicking, that's just the circumstances of life and your situation. if you want to see the light, you have to be prepared to go into the darkness. Now, you can let life kick the shit out of you if you want, or you can recognize that something isn't right and you're not feeling right about life. And you can circumnavigate all the pain and the aggravation of life kicking the shit out of you simply by meditating. Medi means middle, to be balanced. The narrow path that few find. It's not on the liberal left and it's not on the conservative right. It's in the middle. It doesn't judge. It just observes. And it's also about the sacred secretion. Letting it descend into Sodom and Gomorrah and then raising it up the middle path, which is your spinal column, the electromagnetic energy in your body. The Ida and Pingala, the mother and father, the male and female, the serpent, the Kundalini, that enters the Garden of Eden and tells you that you can eat the fruit, but God forbid it, because if you eat it, you will be like him, knowing or having knowledge of good and evil. When you raise the energy into the Garden of Eden, that's good. And then you will understand that the energy upstairs is good and the energy downstairs is evil. That is knowledge of good and evil. And you will be like gods, as us, as it says in the book of Genesis. Let us go down there and confuse them, lest they get the knowledge of good and evil and become like us as gods. Do you understand? So man's interpretation of good and evil is pithy at best and just fucking stupid at worst. It's not about man's interpretation of anything. That's why meditation is key, because it takes all your troubles, your worries, your anxiety away from you, and it balances the energy in your body, because that energy won't move from Sodom and Gomorrah. It won't move through southern Egypt into upper Egypt and then into Israel and then going into Jerusalem. Jerusalem is your pineal gland. The ancient Hebrew word for Jerusalem is Yerushalayim, and it means the source of light, or the source from where light comes. Now we're back to the theme of enlightenment. Ment meaning mind. The enlightened mind, the mind understanding knowledge of good and evil, knowing that it's just a story that it tells itself. But it's okay, because when you know, you'll be known and be as gods. So it isn't about being a bohemian person. It isn't about being a hippie. It isn't even about being fucking nice. Just for the sake of being nice. Just in case God's watching. Or any of that nonsense. That pious shite. It's a hypocrisy. It's just a show. It's just another act. It's not real. So what is real? Consciousness is real. The story you tell yourself fucking isn't. When you go into the pictures, the movies, when you watch, I don't know, whatever genre you're interested in, you know what you're watching on the silver screen is not real. But you allow yourself to absorb it, and it influences you. It might be an action movie. You got your adrenaline pumping and you wish you was the character in the fight. Or it might be a comedy where you'll laugh along and and you know you're going to laugh. so you laugh more. Or it might be a sad story that pulls on your heartstrings, but that's why you go there, so you can allow yourself to be washed away by the magic that comes off the silver screen, which is produced by great playwrights and actors. And then you leave the cinema knowing full well it was just entertainment and it was just a little treat for yourself. And then you go back into real life, carrying on your act. And enjoying everybody else's act. The world's a stage. It's funny because the people that are beat up, the people that are trodden down, the people that dwell in darkness within themselves and they know it, the people that are suffering from depression, worry, anxiety, fear, those are the ones that are closest to the enlightenment. Those are the ones that will be given it if they go within and look for it. Just as Jesus said, seek ye first the kingdom of God. That's meditation. So seek first the kingdom of God. It's your own higher consciousness. It's always been there. You wouldn't be experiencing the gift of life if it wasn't there. So for those of you that exist in a dark place, turn that despair inwards. Don't bother looking at mankind's affairs and wagging your finger. You're just blowing energy off in the wrong direction. You need to turn that energy inwards. Where attention goes, energy flows. Go within. That's what Noah's Ark is about. Who shut the door on Noah's Ark? It wasn't Noah, it was God. So God being your own higher consciousness, remember, ye are gods. You just need to wake yourself back up to that fact. So when Noah went into the ark, it was God that closed the door. In other words, when you're meditating, after a particular period of time, you're gone. The ego is no longer there. The story that you tell yourself dissolves. That's God closing the door. That's what it's about. It's the same thing as Enoch walked with God, and then Enoch was not because God took him. It's the same thing. And it's a process. It gets revealed to you. It's a way, a narrow way. Only the individual can do it. Only you can do this. No one's going to do it for you. And like they say, if you want to do something properly, do it your fucking self. And all you've got to do is be still and know I am God. That's it. Just sit down and be still. There's no chanting or anything like that. There are things you can do to facilitate the process. Kick off your shoes and socks. Go and stamp on a damp bit of earth or wet concrete. Let your body earth. So you're grounding out. That's why God, when he spoke to Moses on the mountain, the burning bush, which is your brain, said to Moses, take off your shoes when you approach me. In other words, get in touch with the earth. Ground yourself. And then sit in the dark and just be still and just ignore the distractions that are going on around you. And your brain will take care of the rest. And then it will reveal itself to you. And you will be astonished, amazed. You will laugh. And you will laugh chiefly at yourself. And then you'll be amazed at others that carry on their act. And some of them are good acts, and some of them are just really piss poor. But then you get to a point where even the good acts just bore you shitless because it's not authentic. So there you go. Quite a lot of information to chew on then. And yes, you've been listening to me in the dark, because if you want to see the light, you've got to be in the darkness.